So I'm not really used to doing this, so I'm not really sure how to start this, but there's been a lot of stuff happening lately, politically and in my own personal life. So I end up thinking inevitably, of course, about aliens. I don't know if it's a form of escapism or what, but it's something that's fascinated me deeply since I was a little kid. I know that's like all of a sudden everybody is talking about UFOs. And I'm not even sure if I want to go into the extraterrestrial thing right now, but to toot my own horn a little bit, this is something that has been very important to me for one reason or another since I was a little kid. And literally the first and some of the only books I ever checked out at the school library, public library, growing up, books about this and other mysteries that we hadn't yet solved, although our culture, as some know, very much likes to go around, behaving as if we know so many things, as if so many things are solved, and that may be the case. But these mysteries remain, and where they remain, they're uncomfortable. And that's not necessarily because of little green men or anything. I think it's because these subjects tickle something uncomfortable in the sense that sometimes these are truly unknown. It's almost as if in some of these cases, and there are a lot of cases, very many of which are unexplained, it would be easy if it was aliens. That would be very straightforward. That would be predictable, understandable. So many of these things are just saturated with what's come to be called high strangeness, and that is about any number of things, inexplicable events. The tendency occasionally for some of these, let's call them objects, for lack of a better word, seem to evade study, evade detection. And everybody says, well, we have so many phones and so much technology. How can these things hide? I mean, submit the idea that, and I can understand why this does not smack as scientific or anywhere close, because it's not, and it's in defiance of the scientific method. But imagine that you're studying an intelligent quarry that doesn't want to be studied, and is perfectly capable of evading detection. If you're willing to accept the idea that you're dealing with something or someone, or let's call it an entity, agency that possesses intelligence, and some of our most basic thoughts about intelligence indicate, like in our studies about intelligence with corvids such as jays, deception, and the ability to detect when you're being monitored, and the idea that you're being monitored affecting the behavior of what we regard as intelligent animals or intelligent beings. We factor that in. And on the flip side, on the other side, these would all sound very, very strange and implausible and unbelievable, except that some of our most advanced physicists, theoretical physicists, Eric Weinstein, Avi Loeb, and others, are looking at this and in some ways recognizing some of these factors. The high strangeness factors in. J. Allen Hynek, who studied this officially through Project Blue Book, formerly Project Sign, Project Drudge. People recognize that as a fail, policy fail, but in fact, reading between the lines, Hynek actually said there's enough here, there's a there, and basically, it's, the phrase high strangeness, I believe, came from him. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but so this has been the fact throughout these things, and it hasn't actually changed. per se. It's just that the number of people that are talking about this and giving it credibility now is so much higher because these highly credible events with clear data have appeared again and again in the sky, specifically around military installations. There's a lot of talk about like why that's happening. Is it lasers? Is it a psyop? Is it what and why now? And all of this. And are they preparing for threat? Are these reproduced vehicles of our own make somehow with or without the assistance of technology that may or may not have come from just extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, or just clever humans that we swept under the rug as we found use. Certain agencies found use. I mean, the structure exists. We're just like the government's competence, blah blah blah. There is a black budget. The DoD, Pentagon can't account for. They can't. They're the only government agency that can't pass an audit. Where does all that money go? It's in corporations, multinational weapons manufacturers, the likes of Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing, and all of these that have the government contracts, the facilities, and they're basically running these places, doing a lot of this research, and so it can't actually be accessed by a lot of the members of government. That's possibly why there's such a huge push right now in government to get back control of something that some people finally are realizing may have left their control long ago, right around the time that Eisenhower was making his speech about the military-industrial complex. So to get back to high strangeness and the behavior of these objects and the tendency they have to sometimes just behave so bizarrely, I can think of one other example in the history of science that smacks of this, and that's the behavior of the particles involved, or particles/waves involved in the double slit experiment in quantum physics. Some of these foundational experiments that revealed things like the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. We ended up figuring out after these bizarre set of experiments were revealed that at the tiniest level, the observer, affects reality in a very measurable way. Just to go over it, the fact that these particles were being observed as they were being shot through these two slits, they did it once when it, or several times when it was being observed at close range with some sort of tracker of these particles, and that it resulted in a pattern you'd expect from teeny tiny billiard balls hitting the opposite wall. I'm butchering this, but when they were not observing these things in such a minute capacity, they would make a interference pattern, which is indicative of a wave. So their nature shifted to one of absolute probability. We call this, created words for this. We call it superposition. The revelation that the electron is actually not these little balls going around a planet like we envisioned. They're actually more of like a cloud of potential probability that interacts with all the other clouds of potential probability that exist around all these other motes, infinitely impossibly small motes to detect volume-wise, which is the neutrons and protons in the center of the nucleus of the atom. But that there's these electrons, and they behave weirdly as well. Like they have strange features, like the weird tendency to almost that would sound like anthropomorphizing, but predict where they're going to go in a circuit to the point where that circuit, its nature changes, and they if a certain route is available to them versus another route, we can see using lasers, interferometers, other minute measurements when when these electrons are going through a channel or not, and have been able to trick them into revealing but only with some very, very clever math. Otherwise, these things wouldn't be observable. And for a while, that was the state. And you sort of want to maybe like leave it there. A lot of mystics and spiritualists and people I know, myself included, from time to time, tend to like spiritualize it maybe a little bit too much. But I also believe in metaphysics, which, the basic principle is that nothing unreal exists, and you can't really stop there. You have to figure out some deeper thing, and that's where new science is made. So here with this phenomena, you have something. Here's a conjecture. Here's the conjecture. What if what we're observing is not necessarily a physical being from another planet or this planet or any other planet, but maybe I keep redoing my headphones so they don't go out. I have these wireless headphones. They are a kind of function of our universe, error correction of sorts that involves trimming branches of time. We have multiple worlds theory where every time an atom goes in a different direction, all the potential places that reality could have split off. And we can imagine time infinitely branching and all these. I'm not sure if simulation theory is accurate or anything, but even if there is some sort of higher dimensional math mainframe structure to the universe in planes we may not fully understand yet, that's a lot of data, that's a lot of bandwidth, that's a lot to handle. If I was designing a simulation, I would create some sort of system to keep the system from branching in too many directions for the computer to be able to handle. Not to say that this is a computer, but some people see, the universe as with or without simulation theory, it's as a biological computer itself. With or without life, it's a kind of computer processing information, energy, matter, endlessly in very precise mechanisms. Not that it creates an algorithm that's detectably like artificial or human or anything like that, but that, obviously that factors in. We are a part of this universe, and therefore, artificiality is arguably a part of this universe at the entangled, like, all universe level. But even so, it has this intelligence that, like, evolves, and these patterns. And why do those exist? What is that? So we're thinking about this state, call it extra-dimensional, intradimensional. Plato, who made up the Platonic solids, named after him, imagined this perfect kind of state, or this ideal place where the mathematical forms emerged and the rules emerged and the laws emerged. There's this ongoing debate in math. What's the origin of math? The great debate. Where does math come from? Does it come from the universe? Is it something we discover, or is it something we've created and applied? Whether or not it necessarily needs to be. And these things exist somewhere on the cusp of all of that. Something Gary Nolan said, and others have said, that it's like a frontier of consciousness itself, something in the universe ensuring that things stay weird, and just interesting enough to keep the monkeys evolving on a certain trajectory that keeps them asking questions. Too many, stories about physicists and aeronauts and engineers and people that go on to do great things having these experiences, seeing these objects, and some people are saying, like, what if these things just exist to exist, and it's some sort of function, whether or not it's a race that's discovered time travel or from the future, ensuring that the past exists in a certain way. Or I think it's much more complicated than that. What if you take the idea that this universe is a sort of fractal. When I was in astronomy in college, I was always struck with the pure metaphor, and you see memes where people have connected the dots, no pun intended, where they've taken a map of the brain and the neurons connecting and shown how the great web, as they call it, of galaxies and electromagnetic filaments throughout the universe connecting the galaxies and the clusters to other galaxies. And it looks very, there's that. There's the fact that the ratio of mass to volume, the ratio of mass of the sun center of our solar system to the rest of the mass in the solar system is roughly, they're on par with that of a hydrogen atom, the nucleus of a hydrogen atom to the surrounding debris material. And it's funny, I just got through talking about how atoms aren't little planets with billiard balls going around them. But imagine that, time factors in here, and that those things are moving so fast that it would appear to be a probability field, or even something else, and we know now about all these different little gizmos, little quarks, little subatomic particles coming in and out, popping in and out of existence all around these freaking little things, because of our crazy experiments we've done in insanely high energy and insanely tiny spaces. And it results in these anomalies, and we can track these objects. I said objects, particles. It leads me to a place where volume too, by the way, volume seem roughly the same ratio in the opposite sense. 99.99% of the solar system is voluminously, that's the rest, and very small little thing by volume has all the matter. Anyway, that these things, what if these are the equivalent of those high energy subatomic particles, the error correction system in the code of the universe, but at macro, and another idea, while all this stuff is going on, I hear Dr. Avi Loeb, who I greatly respect, going on about how we've dumped all this energy, literal energy, time, and money into string theory to create the CERN Large Hadron Collider, to chase down all these things to as he says, to see how many angels are dancing on the head of a pin, and that's all very silly. And we should move along now, because it's not, those experiments aren't borne out in reality. At the same time, he wants to spend money. We want to spend money to go and track these things objectively, as if they are a objectively trackable object, which, if you study in any literature, that's just not the case. Meantime, here's an idea. What if string theory isn't a waste, and somehow these crazy mathematicians, by observing the fact that mathematics actually obeys no commander. That's what string theory really reveals. And I don't do the math, but what I had come to understand is that it reveals that there's no underlying commander. And in the process of doing these crazy experiments, we've ruled out so many crazy ideas that the math shows us are impossible, and we're left with certain. These are the ways this thing works. In that process, what if this is something that civilizations go through, and in the meantime, as they're developing AI, complex systems, intelligences that are capable of moving at the speed of light and beyond, and appreciating time and space on a four-dimensional plane, better than biological humans, because we're limited to this grounded perspective in our corporeal form. Not to say that AI is better or anything. What if this process of coming up with, running through, doing the math for, testing out, hashing out these theories, these post-Einsteinian theories, is this breeding process of an counterintuitive technology that becomes, in a way, its own evidence. That at certain high frequencies and high energies, it's possible to break through, in a way, the boundaries and rules of this physical plane of reality and do things and have things and go places where this space-time simply will not allow. And I know that sounds really far out, but bear with me. What if the fact that string theory has no... While you're saying that string theory has no bearing and no objectively trackable, testable hypothesis to it, and yet there is this observable phenomenon that seems to violate all these other things and perhaps even display through some of these bizarre stories that do involve lifespans, time, sometimes out-of-body experiences, life and death, astronomical events. The people that have these experiences, some of the people that have these, sometimes for their entire lives, describe this insanely high strangeness that plays with time and consciousness in a very, very unique way. You know, that before, during, and after, it's hard to pin down a precursor in the beginning of this universe to provide, that sort of kicks the can down the road. Where once you have this breakaway from space-time, this breakaway civilization from space-time, then it's possible to have other breakaway civilizations from space-time, because then they're going to other space-times and interacting with other intelligences as they emerge, so that they can also do this breakaway from space-time. In that sense. But then you have to be left with this original progenitor species that did it in the first place. I would submit that given that the Big Bang contained, as they say, all of the matter and space in existence. I don't even know why I'm doing that. All of the matter, space, and time that would ever exist contained within before the rupture. Sort of like the cosmic egg in the, Rig Vedas, Brahma, the unfractured egg that is, contains all that, and that the fissures in that egg as it's cracking yet also has not cracked, and is also both of those things at once, contains, by virtue of the fact that it contains these intelligences, is itself intelligence, and thereby nature has that facet. That might be a philosophical thing that some people need to deal with, of where that works out. But it sort of relates. If we're talking about a location separate from space-time, or a civilization or understanding or technology that can bridge itself outside of the directly applicable laws of this universe, including the flow of time, then we're also, what is that a description of? There's a few things in this universe that's a description of. One is whatever exists at the other side of that Big Bang that we cannot see. That I also believe that it is banged and yet still banging, and yet also still not banged. That is the fundamental premise driving what we know of as entanglement, which I drove Einstein crazy. He called it spooky action at a distance. It does have bearing. We have proved it out, and still struggling to understand. So given that that contains these, and these also spring from this, and also, somehow our intelligence also spring from this, and you have to imagine that ape looking up in the sky at whatever time or whatever being, and seeing, or if there's direct involvement. Lots of people have lots of different theories. I don't even want to go there. I'm going to talk about this potentially, like, call it a macro quantum physical a quantum physical phenomenon displayed at macro, exhibiting tendencies of an advanced interdimensional intelligence with aspects of high strangeness and deep roots into the nature of consciousness itself, possibly. I don't think you need Zachariah Stitchin's stuff. I don't think you need Eric Von Daniken's stuff. I don't think you need Ancient Aliens to make everything aliens for there to be a deep connection here. And I don't think necessarily that the question of other species or not, other planets or not, where are these things coming from? When are these things coming from? It could be everywhere and everywhen. And that's a little bit freaky. And I wish I was the only one saying this. This is something that's occurred to me long, long before any of these super duper smart people finally caught on to something that we were noticing for a very long time. Sorry, guys. It's nice to have you. It's a very difficult thing. I wish everybody that's studying this a lot of luck. I'm not trying to drag anyone. I think that if you want to study this, and this is just, perspective, I think you need to consider these other things. Develop some, look at those things we know of in this reality that behave like this, as silly and strange and crazy as it might sound. Look at those things and look at the mathematical patterns there, and match them up to the mathematical patterns here, and develop some sort of ideas, structure, an experimental structure that takes into account the idea that what you're observing is not a rock or a blind feature of this normal reality, but an active participant in not just reality, but perhaps even your own consciousness. That if you want to go study this, you need to, as we all should, prepare yourself for the idea that you might also be studied. And that, that who is really the mouse here? Are you going to study a thing? Or are you being prompted in as part of some gigantic interdimensional, huge, just possibly big, ongoing conscious project that you going out to look for a artifact, physical artifact in the sky to verify to your other monkeys is a part of. You're playing into a game of sorts. And play, please, that's the point. Please play. Do that. And to anybody that sounds, watches this, friends and family, that's like, okay, Brendan's completely gone off his rocker. The deep end is well past Brendan. Brendan's on the, so far over the hill, he's on the bottom of the other side. Know that this is me. This is who I am. This is who I always am and have been. And anybody who really knows me, who's like sat up until 3 a.m. having any of these kinds of conversations with me, will know this. And not all of you have seen that side of me. So, I want to do these. I can't really get to this too often. It seems to work after everybody's asleep. Go figure. And that was stopping me for a long time until I realized I should just drink some more coffee and stay up. And as unhealthy as that may be, I need to get this out. My whole life has literally been dedicated to this study, not just UFOs, but consciousness, civilization, physics, what the meat, the nuts and bolts of everything. Independent study wise, I don't know how to measure that on an academic calendar. Like, oh, my entire life? Oh, like every other second of every day that I'm not working or being with my kids or any other thing, I'm thinking about this stuff constantly. How do you track that? Anyway, I think that I could be of service to this discussion, and I'm just putting myself out there. And I hope that it lands. No pun intended. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. Bye.